A Hawaiian baby Woodrose trip report, sent in by a subscriber. Greetings, dear reader. Here I present to you an experience of mine that occurred in 2010, which is still as clear as day in my mind even today. I would like to share it for educational and safety purposes, but also just for your introspection. I hope it will also be a good read. I should quickly mention that I have also tripped on psilocybe cubensis upwards of 10 times. I like to reserve my trips for when I am absolutely ready and in a relatively healthy state of mind, to fully absorb whatever beautiful truths and realizations materialize, as profoundly as possible. I usually brewed psilocybe as hot water extracts, teas, but have also partaken of a psilocybin-infused chocolate bar and ingested the mushroom itself once or twice. I never felt nauseous at all from them, and I quite enjoyed and appreciated the earthy flavour. I have also smoked Salvia divinorum from 2010 to perhaps 2014, only about 5 to 10 times, but always with less of an effect than what is usually reported. I must have not been able to hold the smoking long enough, or something to that effect, as I never had a very intense experience with it. Well, anyway, here goes nothing. It was early autumn where I was living, and that crisp, refreshing atmosphere, alight with its colourful leaves falling from the trees, was absolutely intoxicating. I was attending university in this city, and was really enjoying the excitement of being there. I was working on my second year at university, doing very well in all of my classes up to this point. The character and energy of this city had proven to really bring out my extroverted and energetic side more than ever, which I can still remember and physically feel even to this day. I was constantly out walking the streets and enjoying the scenery, practically every moment that wasn't hitting the books. There was oftentimes bustling pedestrian traffic on the streets in the areas that I frequented. These streets were largely lined with cafes, restaurants, shops and parks, where many people would sit and contemplate this or that. Some would be having very animated conversations with each other, while others were studiously squinting at laptop screens. I just remember each day feeling more and more like I was tapping into the most enjoyable part of my life, and I wanted to explore who I was and what it all means. I was always an engaged and curious person, enthralled by the mysteries of the universe and life. Even my fashion changed after moving here, to reflect how I felt. I really did feel that I could be my authentic self there, and being gay, this was something that for me was very liberating and exciting. The lack of oppression, and like a type of rebirth, I would say. Previously, I had always been very timid and studious, trying to be what my family wanted me to be. I'd been exposed to cannabis the previous year, 2009, by a fellow resident at university, but only truly began using it daily about a year after that first exposure. During the time in which the events described below occurred, it had become a near daily habit for me already. I loved, and still do love cannabis, though I've struggled with overuse and abuse for now over a decade. There used to be a store in the southern extremity of the hipster borough in the city, called Psychonaut. The owner was well versed in the provision of entheogenic substances. However, frustratingly, he would only provide what he thought the person was ready for, or so he claimed. I was in fact searching for San Pedro cactus, as I felt a calling to this plant and its medicine at the time. He immediately told me that he did not have any, but I did see a cactus in the corner of his shop. What I was suggested to try instead will forever leave untold scars on my life. He suggested that I try Hawaiian baby Woodrose seeds. I did not purchase these seeds right away that same day. Instead, I did some reading online and saw that they contain lysergic acid amide, or LSA. I messaged a friend I had made the previous year while living in Res. He agreed that it should be an interesting experience, so I returned and picked up 8 of the seeds for about $10 Canadian. A few days later, during the late afternoon, around 4 PM, I had just let my friend R into my apartment. It was just the two of us, and I was sitting with him at my dining table, Hawaiian baby Woodrose seeds out and ready to go. I was making sure to carefully and meticulously peel all of the dark outer coating off of each of the seeds. I remember feeling an intense wave of anticipation, but not in a bad way. I then put the chunky brown seeds, that looked rather interesting and seemed to have an intimidating aura about them, into my small marble mortar and pestle. I pounded and ground them carefully until they were reduced to a fine powder. I did this with 4 seeds at a time, so that my friend and I each had an equal dose, at least of seed powder. Concentrations of active ingredients may vary from one seed to the next, of course. Thinking back on this moment, I was foolish to take all 4 seeds as a first dose. A rookie mistake indeed. We then began to eat the seed powder, tentatively at first. It was very bitter in an earthy sort of way. I'm not at all turned off by strange tasting things though. I even enjoy eating bitter melon. After about what seemed like 20 minutes, I began to feel a very heavy, droopy feeling in my body, and the lights in my apartment were suddenly noticeable and more intense seeming. When I glanced at the mirror, I saw that my face looked quite pale and sallow. I distinctly noticed and was intensely disturbed by the realization that my right pupil was noticeably larger than my left pupil. This is in fact always the case with my eyes. It just seemed absolutely wrong and horrifying at that moment for some reason, as if it were grossly amplified. My pupils were also both very dilated, more than I had ever seen them before. I quickly left the bathroom and asked my friend, "Look, do you see this pupil? It's larger." At that moment he was sitting on my sofa, looking off ahead into space in a daze. But he then abruptly said he had to leave to get home and be alone. And I reluctantly said goodbye. I began to have the sense that the idea of clothing itself was an absolute abomination, and I was starting to feel like it was nothing more than a hindrance to my body. All of a sudden, it simply just felt wrong to have clothing hanging off of my body. I started to feel that my mind was becoming extremely powerful and clear, more sharp and quick than it had ever been before in my life. I promptly removed all of my clothing, save for my underwear. I began to engage in some sort of slow, deliberate, ecstatic dance in the middle of my living room, to no music at all. But then it suddenly became stupidly clear that all light was an assault on my senses. I turned off every single light in my apartment and closed the blinds completely. I felt as if I was able to move and think much more quickly and intelligently than usual. In spite of this, I got the urge to lay down on the couch, and I opened up my laptop and booted up MSN Messenger. Yes, this was 2010 after all. I just felt the need to connect with others in that moment, as I did not want in any way to be alone at all. I began to converse with as many friends online as I could at one moment, and I began to see that my hands were in fact very, very much like spiders. Rather than hands typing, my fingers were the legs of spiders, and were capable of moving with such unimaginable speed and accuracy. The legs of the spiders' bodies were able to move at a lightning speed compared to my usual fingers, and my thoughts were forming at breakneck velocity and accelerating. Yet I could type and converse at what seemed to be a godly rate to me at that moment. I got the sense that I had become extremely powerful, intelligent, quick, and just much more intense than a human could possibly be. I felt that I was gaining a sort of godlike persona. By now, the light from my laptop was like a lighthouse in an ocean of darkness, and my hands were spiders flailing in front of the light, conveying messages to those on the other side. I was explaining to my closest friends that I was tripping on LSA, from Hawaiian baby Woodrose seeds, and how it felt while on LSA. I explained how lysergic acid amide, LSA, is molecularly similar to lysergic acid ethylamide, LSD, but that it occurs naturally in some plant species. The glowing of my laptop and the oddly rigid dashing movements of my spider leg fingers as I typed in the dark room was just an extension of my consciousness. Over time, everyone began signing off on MSN Messenger to go to bed, as it was now approaching midnight. All of a sudden, when my last friend signed off, however, I began to have an utterly terrific sense of profound dread. The darkness of my bedroom, where I had moved to at some point, was evil. The silence was heartless. I began to feel very thirsty and nauseous at the same time. The dread began to swallow me up. This is where things took a tragic and bizarre nosedive into hell. The crushing sense of loneliness began to take over, and I could start to feel my heart beating uncomfortably fast. I got up with no lights on, yet I could see everything clearly. What little light that was coming through cracks and crevices was intense enough in this state for me to see clearly. Now the nausea and waves of weakness passing through me and the sense of dread were overcoming me. I went to the bathroom and got so viciously sick to my stomach that I was curling up as I retched. There, on the floor of the bathroom, I must have stayed for at least an hour in utter writhing agony. I thought to myself, please don't let me die in the bathroom, throwing up into the toilet. Please, not like this. So I found my way to my feet, put on some pyjamas, and tried to have some fruit juice, a tropical blend from a certain brand. At first it tasted as wonderful as always, but to my surprise the sugar must have triggered some sort of rejection in my body, perhaps caused by the Hawaiian baby Woodrose seeds. I felt a new, even worse wave of nausea expand through me, and I ran back to the washroom where more misery ensued. This was a very persistent, unending nausea with no end in sight. My heart began racing again, and I looked in the mirror using a very dim orange nightlight. What I saw was most terrifying and ghastly to me. I perceived in the mirror that my skin looked at least 20 years aged. I was 20 at the time. And each scar or bump on it looked so much more ridiculously pronounced. My pupils were extremely dilated, and I had the appearance of a morbid individual. This sent me even more quickly down the mental spiral of doom. I quickly called one of my good friends, S, who was from the same town as me. We didn't know each other before meeting in the city for university though. I told her what I had taken and that something wasn't right, and I needed her to come and check on me to see what she thought. She was extremely kind, and said she would be there as fast as she could. I feel that this next piece was an actual precipitation of the anxiety disorder that is still with me to this day, that destroyed my long-term relationship with the love of my life, and that has eaten away at me ceaselessly ever since. Only now, I am finding ways to let it go more than before, and to be able to enjoy larger parts of my life. Sudden panics can resurface at any time though. They usually revolve around health-related catastrophizing. Anyway, I was waiting for my friend, wondering what would happen to me ultimately, with my heart absolutely in tachycardia, when I heard an ambulance or something outside. This city is kind of crazy of how often you hear sirens, whether they are fire trucks, police cars, or ambulances, especially downtown where I was living. I suddenly became even more terrified that my friend might have called an ambulance for me, and that the paramedics would whisk me to the hospital. They would surely call my parents and my university and the police and it was suddenly as if something inside my mind shattered. My heart was simply going to explode. The ambulance was coming, I thought. It was almost here. It had to be. It's all over now. What will I do? Slowly, the ambulance siren faded away as I sat on a chair in the kitchen, trying to calm my heart down in utter terror. My heart just kept on pounding at an ungodly speeds. Sometime after this, my friend found her way into my rather sketchy building and knocked on my apartment door. Knowing how horrific I looked, wrapped in a blanket, hunched over in nausea and all sallow and whatnot, I slowly opened the door. She did indeed seem shocked to see how dark my apartment was, and how out of sorts and terrified I was. She intelligently opted to calm me down and sit with me in my living room as I threw up projectile style into a bucket and waited until things slowly abated. She truly is a sweet person, with a kind soul. I felt like I could really count on her. Without her, I'm not sure how much worse this could have been. Things eventually calmed down and I eventually stopped retching. She headed out, and I went straight to bed and slept for about 7 or 8 hours. I was still somewhat nauseous and weak when I woke up the next day, and was certainly out of commission for the whole day. I felt the lingering sense of anxiety, but much less, and I was happy that the LSA seemed to be wearing off. While my body recovered just fine over the days, my mind is left with the remaining effect of this anxiety. Other terrible things then also happened over the next few months, which surely solidified this anxiety into my psyche. But I am certain that these seeds were the precipitant for what I believe to be a type of psychosis around body anxiety, where I become unable to tell what is really a dangerous ailment and what is not, and what is potentially threatening versus what isn't. If you have a family history of anxiety, I would stay away from these seeds. Pay close attention to your family and learn your origins and tolerances. I can still persist in life. I keep a full-time job, I have my own car and apartment, and I have hobbies I love and enjoy. But I wonder what I could have become without precipitating this anxiety. Will I ever be able to really get past it? It's been 14.5 years. Would it have happened at a later time in my life otherwise? I realise I was perhaps just unlucky, as everyone else around me who tried these seeds was just fine. I wanted to become learned in the ways of shamanistic practices surrounding plants and fungi, but this unfortunately was a damaging trip for me. I do hope that after reading this you might take more caution in your choices. Learn as much about yourself as you can, and ensure that you will not be alone or in any compromising situation before tripping. You really must ensure a comforting, safe, happy environment before engaging with potent mind-altering substances. To what extent did my cannabis habit affect the progression of this anxiety? I do not know. But I did use high THC illegal cannabis for many years. It became legalized and regulated here around 7 years ago now. I indulged in the volcano vaporizer, and would get simply blasted out of my skull with weed, greening out from time to time, from 2013 until 2023, when I began truly reducing my use and finding wonderful things about stopping, such as the return of meaningful, vivid dreams. Dreams have always been a spiritual gateway for me. My goal is to gain full dream lucidity. Thankfully, I had discovered psilocybin in 2012, 2 years later, and had my first truly wonderful psychedelic experience, the first of several, always wonderful psilocybin trips. So, all in all, I'm glad to say that my relationship to psychedelics, in the form of psilocybe, was restored to a glorious state. Many thanks to the subscriber who sent this report in. Really great case study in how some substances can really mess you up for life. Like this person says, very respectfully, he knows many people who use these seeds and had a completely tolerable experience, maybe even a glowing experience, something that changed them for the better, with no sacrifices. In the case of this person, like in essence, he took these and then in the end developed a deeper relationship to psychedelics and psilocybin, and then that became his like medicine of choice. But in a sense, the sacrifice was his stability of mind. And this is something I can definitely relate to as a psychonaut and someone on the spiritual path. I am not the same person I used to be. I'm actually going through a bit of a dark night of the soul right now. It's very heavy times for the old Vivec consciousness, to be honest. I'm feeling very confused and a bit aimless, a bit nihilistic. But thankfully, due to my psychonautic background and spiritual knowledge, or whatever knowledge that may be, ironically, I don't actually know fuck all, but I'm very aware that this dark night of the soul is the catalyst for deeper growth, and that the suffering of my soul is quite literally my spirit's way of gagging for greater growth, to catalyse a deeper change within my state of being. But enough about me. Anyway, I thought that this was a really interesting Hawaiian Baby Woodrose report, because whilst there's many similarities to LSD, there is one major distinction, I would say, is that there's an extreme body load. Obviously, body load can vary for people, depending on the psychedelic, depending on the person, various factors, what you ate beforehand, your genetic makeup, your environment, etc. We all know about all the variables about how psychedelics can affect us. But Hawaiian Baby Woodrose seeds, and especially psychedelic plants like these seeds, they can have a greater body load, and there's always going to be some level of nausea. There might not be for some people. Some people eat mushrooms and don't get any nausea. I literally avoid mushrooms nowadays. I can't deal with the nausea anymore. Not even just out of the fear of pain, but I actually am now suffering with some gastrointestinal problems that I have inherited in a hereditary sense from my family. And every time I've taken mushrooms now, there's this quite devastating disparity between the euphoria of my mental state of being and the dysphoria of my physical state. And I don't think mushrooms are doing me very well anytime I take them nowadays. Whereas recently, I may or may have not, someone who isn't myself, had a LSD experience, and it was one of the best trips I've had in a long time. Literally just came on like that, absolutely no come up or anything. And for someone who wasn't me, that was a rather enlightening experience, and told me a lot about myself, and sort of brought me out of my dark night of the soul for the brief period that the person who may have taken that experienced. It must be said, if you are going to use Hawaiian Baby Woodrose seeds or any plant-based psychedelic, be wary of the fact that there may be a deeply nauseating element to the experience, and that whilst during the come up, reaching to the peak, it might all be sunshine and rainbows. This was quite interesting during the report, where he said that when he drank some juice, he felt like the sugary element to that contrasted with had this conflicting relationship with the Hawaiian Baby Woodrose's effects throughout his body. I'm not a biologist. I don't really know what the crack is, but it makes a lot of sense. And oftentimes it's healthy to trust your intuition, and I think this person did as well. So, yep, just be careful when you're taking any substance just be careful taking any substance in general, but yeah, you've got to be pretty mindful of the fact that if you have a sensitive stomach, if you've got gastrointestinal problems, you need to be very wary of taking any psychedelic, especially the plant-based ones, because they can really mess you up physically. And at the end of the day, regardless of how many reports you read, we still don't know everything about all of these substances and the effect that they have on our body. And I'm starting to think now, over time, reading so many reports and talking to so many other psychonauts, that substances regardless of how safe they are on the substance safety tier list, like the top being fentanyl and the bottom being, I don't know, mushrooms, I still think taking psychedelics that are safe by contrast, I still do think they have, I still do think they can have a bit of a damaging effect on some elements of the body. I don't know this for certain, so don't take this as gospel. This is just something I've been pondering on for quite a while, that I think perhaps, especially from my own experience of sort of 10 years of experimenting with psychedelics, that I think I have had quite a... I think there has been quite a, not a devastating effect on my body, but I think it has affected my central nervous system quite a lot, from taking many psychedelics over the years, and it's a big reason for me sort of taking a break from them, because I really do want to focus on my health, especially with my looming health issues and current dark night of the soul state of being. So, yep. But anyway, don't worry about me, I'm sure I'll be fine, and to be honest, I'm more concerned about the writer here. I really hope that even, I know you said here it had been like 14 years, was it 14 years? Since that experience, 14 and a half years even. I hope that one day you manage to resolve that anxiety within yourself. I really relate to that. There was a period in my life where I think and I know exactly why, my ego knows why. I'm having a lot of ego backlash at this point in my life. From 2018 to 2019, 2018 to 2020, I was meditating a lot, and I felt very much at peace with my own mind, and I've slipped out of that habit. And I've become, I've sort of slipped back into my inner child shadow, if you call it that. I was always a very lazy child, very sloth-ridden. If I was one of the 7 deadly sins, if I embodied one of them, it would have been sloth. I was always just like, oh, what's the point with that? I can't be arsed. Oh, I don't want to do that. And this laziness also compounded into a fear of just like, well, I can't even be bothered to leave my house to go to the shop to get some sweets or something. I can't be bothered to grow as a person. And then actually it's sort of like circle back around, and maybe maybe now thinking about it, it was actually stemming from fear, just fear of the outside world. And I've always had this anxiety. It's weird, because I think if people ever met me, they would be very surprised to see how extroverted I am, but that took a lot of inner work and socializing over many years. A lot of hard work on my behalf went into restructuring my personality, but deep within me there is always this anxiety, this inner child anxiety that has never gone away, and that unfortunately a few years ago, after I had my really serious 4-ACO DMT trip, whilst it was also the closest I've ever come to realizing God, I have been stricken with like existential anxiety that I think is delusional, to be honest. It's delusional. A lot of my anxious thoughts, I mean, all my anxious thoughts are delusion. It's just all fear. But nevertheless, they are pervasive, and I do my best to really try and quell them. It's really quite a tough one, but I'm figuring it out slowly but surely, experimenting with lots of stuff. At the moment, I've realised that psychedelics aren't having a crystallizing effect. They're not. I'm trying to integrate it, but they're not really solidifying within me. Neither the psychedelic insights in the trip or the integration that I've deeply tried to imbue with journaling and contemplation. There's some deeper stuff that I need to do. I think I'm on the verge of doing some very serious solo travelling. I think that would be a great challenge for myself. I think within me I'm looking for a challenge, but also within me is the deeply scared child of the world, and a lack of self-esteem, and just a lack of confidence in my own abilities. But yeah, I can't believe that these commentary sections have now become my own personal diary in a sense. But I hope that these don't annoy you too much. And if you do get annoyed by them, then feel free to just stop listening by the time the trip report ends. But for anyone who does enjoy listening to the commentaries, I really appreciate you guys. And like I said recently, I'm going to be focusing more on reports that are sent in to me directly. So if you do have a report, please email me at vivec853@gmail.com or post a trip report in the trip report submissions channel on my Discord. The links can be found in the description box. Anyway, big love to the guy who wrote this. Hope you're doing well and all the best in your life. Much love, God bless, and I'll see you on the other side.